Hi, this is Eddy White, and I'm associate professor at the University of Arizona, and I'm teaching a course about motorcycle culture. I've been interviewing some local riders in Arizona, and today I have a special guest. Sergeant Shields is joining us from the University of Arizona Police Department, and Sergeant Shields, thanks a lot for helping us out with this.
No problem.
Okay, just to begin, could you tell us your name and age, please?
Yes, my name is Sean Shields, and I am 39 years old.
Okay. And Sergeant Shields, what is your job and how long have you been doing it?
So right now, my current assignment, I'm the sergeant for the community engagement unit here at the University of Arizona Police Department. My responsibilities in this particular assignment are to do community outreach. We do orientation, parent and student orientations at the beginning of the year. We do all the media outreach, and we do most of the presentations around campus. So I've been doing that for about 3 years.
Yeah.
And I've been an officer here for about 13 years. And I was actually a student here at the University of Arizona.
Oh, I see.
And I started in 2002. So I've been here for about 20 years.
Okay, great. Sergeant Shields, so is currently, I mean, is riding a motorcycle, is it currently part of your job that you do regularly or not so much anymore, or?
So right now, because I promoted to sergeant and now I'm I'm in charge of this particular unit. I am what we would consider a supplemental motor. So before I was a full-time motor for about 7 to 8 years, and
Yep.
now I just help out when they need it.
Okay, good. When did you first start riding a motorcycle?
So I started when I was about 28 years old. So I never rode a motorcycle at all before I entered the law enforcement community.
Yep.
And then when I showed interest in doing that, I started, I was about 3 years on the police department when I started riding.
Okay, and so just talking about, you showed some interest. What was it that attracted you to the motorcycle officer unit?
I always thought it was an interesting unit. Most of the squared away and really high functioning officers were motorcycle officers, so that was something that kind of appealed to me. If I'm being brutally honest, the schedule appealed to me the most.
I see. Okay, good. Here's a question, and it's not on the ones I gave you, but it kind of occurred to me later. Just the function of motorcycle officers and motorcycle police. I mean, what do they have that regular police officers or car officers don't have, I guess, is what I'm trying to get to.
Right. So all the speed measuring devices that we have are all kind of the same, whether you're on a motorcycle or in a car. But as you know, riding motorcycles, you can get into places that typically a patrol car wouldn't be able to get to. So you're going to be able to go to any particular call for service, and you're going to be able to get there a lot quicker than if you're in a patrol car. And then obviously the motorcycle officers are in charge of traffic enforcement, DUI enforcement, and just making sure our campus is safe to pedestrians and motorists. It's just a lot easier to complete that function on a motorcycle.
That makes sense. Okay. What type of bike do you ride?
So currently, right now, I am on the Honda ST 1300. Our department and a lot of other agencies are moving to the BMWs. That would be the RT 1250.
Yeah.
And then I actually trained years and years ago when I first started on the KZ 1000, the Kawasaki 1000.
Okay, good. And it's kind of related to my next question, Sergeant. Do motorcycle officers or departments have preferences for types of bikes that they use? And if so, why a particular brand?
Well, right now it's kind of shifting to the BMW, which is why we are going to that platform.
Right.
It has to do with a number of different reasons. It could be cost. It could be, the overall functionality of that particular motorcycle.
Right.
So what we have been finding in law enforcement is that the BMWs are just overall a better bike. So that's where we're kind of going into.
Okay, great. And how often or how many miles do you ride, say, in a week or a month or?
So right now I hardly ride just because I only help with the supplemental duties. But when I was on the motorcycle, I lived approximately, 15 to 20 miles away from the university. So I'd have to go to and from work.
Yeah.
And then depending on the day or depending on whatever we were doing that particular assignment, I probably rode anywhere between 50 and 60 miles a day.
Yeah. Okay, great. Riding is part of your job uniquely, or it was part of your job. So did you also ride in your free times, or I guess maybe when the weekend rolled around, you didn't want to you didn't want to see a bike or get on a bike?
You know what? You're exactly right. I know a number of motorcycle officers that have their personal bikes at home and they choose to ride on the weekends and things like that.
Yeah.
For me, I rode so much during the week at work. I had no real, want to go ahead and ride that bike on my own. So I don't have my own personal motorcycle.
Okay, great. Aside from a helmet, do motorcycle officers wear other protective gear, and is it optional or mandatory?
Right. So obviously we all have to have our eye protection. We wear gloves. We make sure that we're not riding with just our bare hands.
Yeah.
We make sure that we ride in boots no matter what.
Yeah.
Typically, like if we're out at the track, we will be in long sleeve shirts. And then I know that there are a number of agencies that actually have Kevlar pants.
Really?
So yeah, they do. So obviously they're really expensive, but in the event that they may go down, it provides that additional layer of protection. We also have our vests that we wear.
Sure.
So this is also another layer of protection in case something like that were to happen.
Okay, great. Sergeant Shields, you trained new motorcycle officers. So can you tell us a little bit about that experience, and maybe what's the most challenging thing about teaching new officers to ride?
Yeah, so for me, what I've noticed is that, so once you figure out, and what law enforcement calls it, or motorcycle officers call it, is the gray area. And I think what the civilian staff or civilian people call it is the friction zone.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it is a balance between figuring out your gray area and then trusting the bike, right? So that's one of the hardest parts. We also have to get them to, counterbalance and lean with the bike and not be afraid that they're going to lean it too far or fall over.
Yeah.
Right. And then before the ABS system that most of our bikes have now, one of the major hurdles for the motorcycle school was maximum braking.
Yeah.
So that was always a very scary portion of motor school, because if you give too much front brake, you're going to go over the handlebars, or your front portion of the bike could wash out and you go over the handlebars.
Yeah.
And if you give too much rear brake, then you're going to skid, right?
Yeah.
So that was probably one of the most difficult things to do when I went through motor school. But right now they have ABS, so if they do happen to give it a little too much brake, it just enables ABS, so it's not as scary. But from what I can say is we just have to get them comfortable enough to trust the bike and its abilities.
Can I ask you a little bit about that? And because I haven't heard this expression before about trusting the bike, and the officer I talked to about setting up this interview, he also mentioned that phrase too. I mean, could you explain a little bit, what do you mean trusting the bike?
Right. So when a newer motorcycle, any operator, doesn't matter if you're police or not, if, for instance, if you're going a certain speed and you're trying to make a turn either way, you have to be able to know that bike is going to stay under you. You're not going to wash out. It's not going to shoot off and straight.
Yeah.
If you have the proper counterbalancing, the proper gray area or friction zone. So it's kind of a combination of all of it that we teach in motor school. And then once you get to that point where you have a good gray area, you're braking, how fast you can take particular turns,
right?
Depending on what kind of turn you're approaching. Once you have all of that, it's like a mesh of all of that. So it's like trusting your abilities and trusting the bike that it's going to do what you're basically telling it to do.
Great, you explained it very well. It reminds me of something I was reading recently, and it just says, be a good rider. It means be a good person on the bike, and basically don't get in the bike's way of what it's designed to do, and don't interfere with that, which is, it seems like a little bit what you're talking about too.
Yes.
Okay, great. Getting back to just training new officers and things, how long and how difficult, how much training does it take to become a motorcycle officer?
So first, you obviously have to be a certified police officer. So you have to go through all the backgrounds and everything that you would normally do to become a police officer.
Yep.
Typically, if you're a year on or 2 years on, you're not going to be the person that's going to be selected for that position. You need a little bit of time on.
Yeah.
To get that experience in patrol and other areas. But once a position opens up and you have enough time on, you basically have to do an agility test. Is basically to show whether or not you can lift the bike up, because there's going to be a lot of that in the academy, because you're going to be dropping the bike a lot. You have to do an employee's report to express your interest. And typically it'll be followed by an oral board with other motors or other motor officers on that board to kind of ask you questions about why you want to do it, and things like that. So once you get selected for that, then you get selected to motor school. You do a 2-day MSF course,
right?
Followed by a 2 weeks of track of all the cone problems and all the things that you see the motorcycle officers do. And then after that, if you're able to make it through that, you do 2 weeks on road. And basically what that is we are going through all of, Southern Arizona, and we are riding, some of the tougher areas, and we're pair riding together, to make sure that those skills transfer over onto the road. And then after that, depending on the department, you're going to have to do a field training officer program. So that varies depending on department.
So it can take a year or more between expressing interest to actually becoming, and if you're successful.
Yeah, it just depends on how if there is a motor school that year, or how many are going to be put on that year, and then whether or not the department has the available bodies to make that happen.
Yeah. Could you mention a little bit? I mean, could you tell us a little bit about pass-fail rates, and in terms of, which is an indication of, I guess, the difficulty of becoming a motorcycle officer?
Right. And I thought about this one, and it really just depends on the class. Some motorcycle officers that have done it in the past and haven't made it, so their skill level is a little bit better than the person who's just starting. So it really just is dependent on the class. But I would say probably in the 50-50 range to 60-40. Again, it varies. It varies.
Okay, good. And just getting back to just being a rider, and even though you do it less now than you did in the past, what was your primary concern or your primary worry when you were riding your bike?
Right. So for me personally, and I don't know how this is with other motorcycle officers, but I am always making sure to pay attention and be cognizant of people making left turns. Yeah. So left turns, if you're going straight and they make a left in front of you and they don't estimate the speed that you're going, that could be potentially very dangerous. Yes. That's one of them. Obviously people changing lanes into you, right? Because you're smaller on the roadway than you are, driving a car or something like that. Yeah. And just a lot of the times people just flat out don't see you. You're in their blind spot and they'll just come right over into you. That's one. And then, what was the other one? Just people, not paying attention, right? So they're either on their cell phones, or they're thinking about the job interview that they have to go to, or whatever the case is. Those are the types of things that I look for. When I'm riding by someone on the freeway, I'm looking inside their car to see if they're putting on their turn signal, and maybe they don't see me, because that's an indication that, they're probably going to come into me. So I either need to slow down, or speed up, or whatever the case is, to try and avoid that stuff. Yeah, and all of those things that you mentioned, I mean, they increase the safety of the ride also, and not paying attention to those things, I guess that's when we as riders, that's when the risks start going up, I guess. Yes, that's correct. Yeah. Okay. So you have a unique perspective as a rider, combining it with your professional career. What do you notice, and what impressions have you made about the local motorcycle culture, or the riders and the people you see on bikes here in Tucson? Yeah, so I obviously you ride, but what I've noticed in my career as a motorcycle officer, when you go by another motorcycle officer and they're going the opposite way, I would say probably 99% of the time that other motorcycle that motorcycle person on the roadway will wave to you. Yeah, the motorcycle wave. Yes. Yep. Yeah. So I think that's actually it kind of shows that this motorcycle community is a little bit more tight knit than some may think, because they understand the dangers of being on the motorcycle. So it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter if you're a cop, doesn't matter if you're some, biker or street biker, whatever, it doesn't matter. We all know the inherent dangers that riding a motorcycle has. So we have that respect for each other. And also something that I've noticed more recently is, sometimes you'll see like these bikers that have their full like the leather fatigues and all this stuff, tattoos, beards and this and that and the other. A lot of those people are really great people.
Yeah.
I've met some of them, and when you look at them, you don't want to judge a book by its cover, but you go talk to them, and they're the nicest people that you can imagine.
Yeah.
So I think it's very interesting.
Yeah, definitely, and it's a good lesson too about stereotypes and sometimes what we expect from people and what we get can be very different. So great.
Right. Yeah.
In motorcycle officer mode again, what would you like to see more of or less of from motorcycle riders?
I would like to see less of motorcycles running from the police.
I mean, really? So I have no idea this happened. Is this? I guess obviously it does. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean it does happen. It doesn't happen on every traffic stop, obviously, but there are times when you try and say you get them on LiDAR and they're going however fast they're going, and you go to pull them over. Some will just their little license plate flips up and then they just take off. So you can obviously see where that can be very dangerous, but that's just one. I was kind of joking a little bit, but I want to see less of people riding outside of their abilities. There's people that try to do things that on the roadway that they've never tried before, and that's not a very safe way to do it. For us, I know that we do all the training that we do is in a safe environment on the track. As safe as it can be, meaning there's no cars that are going to be able to to hit you or whatever, but so we are able to practice those maneuvers out there and then bring them to the street. We don't just straight practice them on the street. There's a couple things I don't really like to see people splitting cars through traffic, because that can be very dangerous. I always say just to slow down. Obviously go the speed limit, but the slower that you go, you're less likely to get into a huge accident. And then to make sure that everybody's wearing their protective equipment. I see people not wearing helmets. I see people not wearing gloves. I see people riding with flip-flops, sandals on the roadway. And it's a recipe for disaster if if you end up going down. I also this is one thing that really kind of bothers me. I don't know why. We're trained that when you come to a stop, we're going to have our right foot on the rear brake, and then we have one foot down. And then we have the clutch. I don't know if you can see me. We have the clutch sucked in. And we are when we're at any stoplight, our bars are canted one way or the other. And the reason for that is if you hear the screeching brakes coming from behind you, you're going to be able to react quicker and get out of the way of that danger. And what I see a lot with the recreational riders is they get to a stoplight, they pop the clutch into neutral, they take their hands off because they need to shake them out or whatever the case is. And that so if you're not doing that and you hear those brakes coming into you, you're already behind the 8-ball and you have a potential to get rear-ended. So
okay, that's good advice for me too, because I do that sometimes. Maybe I'm relaxing at the lights, and you're reminding me that that can put you in a danger zone too.
It could. And then the last thing I want to mention with that is that we are trained that when we cross, and we call them hazards. A hazard is an intersection, a side street, it's a car, it's basically whatever can hurt you on the roadway. So when we are approaching those and we encounter them, we always make sure that we are covering the clutch and we're scanning the area. In case we have to, hit the brakes and slow down real fast, or we have to maneuver in a certain way. So that's kind of a couple things that kind of I thought of.
There's some very good things there, and some things that I should keep in mind too. I guess you've kind of answered a little bit the last question, Sergeant Shields. So, I mean, aside from taking a motorcycle safety course, what advice would you have for new riders or people thinking about riding a motorcycle?
So I would say, like anything that you're trying to get really good at, you need to try and get as much knowledge as you possibly can about whatever subject it is, whether it's motorcycle riding or math or whatever it happens to be. So always try and, I look up videos and I see people doing certain things and I'm like, oh, okay, maybe that's something that I should try, or, oh, that is actually a good idea.
Yeah.
So I try and gain as much knowledge as I possibly can. What I do is I practice a lot. I make sure that, so I'm a motorcycle instructor. So technically, like, I'm blessed. I'm like one of the people that is, I'm entrusted to teach the younger officers and stuff, but I don't rest on my laurels. I don't just sit there and watch them do it. I get in there and do it with them. And I'm constantly practicing with them when I get that chance. So, and when I say practice, you have to practice the things that you're uncomfortable with, right?
Yeah.
You're never going to improve, or you're never going to get better if you don't practice the things that scare you.
Yeah.
Right. So that's one thing. I always try and tell people, make sure that you are scanning the roadway in front of you, about a quarter to a half a mile in front of you ish, somewhere in that ballpark.
Yeah.
Because if you are constantly looking that far ahead of you, you have a better chance of seeing which hazards could potentially hurt you. And then you can formulate your escape route, or what it is that you're going to do. Do I need to stop? Do I need to go to the left, to the right? Obviously, we're not going backwards. So there's that. But that's basically what I would try to relay to them.
That's great. And you just reminded me of one more question I wanted to ask you about. Just as a rider, I mean, some people listen to music when they're riding and they find it relaxing, but I don't, and I'm hesitant to try it out, just for the things that you just mentioned about being scanning and you need to concentrate on what's going on around you. So just any thoughts about listening to music when riding?
Yeah, so I will typically listen to music on certain rides. It depends on what I'm doing. But it still doesn't alleviate you from making sure that you're paying attention. So if you're listening,
so it doesn't necessarily interfere with what you're doing. You can still listen to music and do the things you need to do.
You can, yes. And again, I would stress your expertise, your level of riding a motorcycle, before you start introducing other distractions.
Yeah. Okay, good.
But yeah, it can definitely be done. Like for instance, when I first started, there's a certain sound that your motorcycle will make when you're in that friction zone.
Right.
There's a certain sound that it makes. So when I first started, I couldn't listen to music because I couldn't hear that sound.
Yeah.
Right. So I didn't know where I was at. I was like, is my grade too high? Is it too low? I had no clue. But with the years and years and years of experience that I have, I don't need to hear that sound anymore. I already know what it feels like, and I already know what it's like. So the sound to me doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah. Okay, good.
It kind of just depends.
Yeah, it's probably good advice too. But for newer riders, maybe leave the music until you get more experience with the bike that you're riding.
That's probably a good idea.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Thank you, Sergeant Shields, for sharing with us your expertise and your background, and I'm sure students will enjoy listening to our interview also. Thank you.
Yeah, I hope so. Thank you.